Kia ora, good evening. Fonterra has announced its earnings for the 2013 financial year will be lower than previously forecast. Fonterra Chief Executive Theo Spearing says the extreme drought in New Zealand earlier this year and the reshaping of Fonterra's Australian business are behind the drop. Fonterra's forecast normalised earnings are likely to be around $1 billion below the $1.08 billion previously forecast. The figure is subject to market uncertainties in the final month of the financial year. The cooperative confirmed its forecast payout to farmers is unchanged at $6.12 and the current earnings per share guidance range of 45 to 50 cents per share has been reconfirmed, although will likely be at the lower end of the range. The Department of Conservation is appealing for help after a critically endangered New Zealand sea lion was found shot dead on a Stewart Island beach. A young female sea lion was shot with a .22 rifle and found dead on the island in mid-June. A DOC investigation has so far failed to identify the culprit. Stewart Island Biodiversity Program Manager Brent Bevan says the animal would have suffered for some time before it died and is very concerned about the shooting. There are only around 10,000 New Zealand sea lions left and their numbers are declining. Anyone with information is being asked to contact police or call 0800 DOC HOT. Didymo has been found in the large burn in western Southland, an area that had previously been untouched by the invasive pest plant, which can affect the native ecosystem and wildlife. Didymo was discovered in Southland in 2004 and is now in the water of the region's main stem rivers, although this is the first time it's been found in Western Fiordland. The weed was found during routine sampling, and Fish and Game Southland Senior Officer Zane Moss says it's disappointing.
We've taken some fairly, serious steps to try and prevent the spread of Didymo. We require anglers to get a clean gear certificate before fishing any of the Fiordland rivers, which requires them to physically bring their gear into here or Department of Conservation and clean it to ensure they haven't got it on any of their gear or their waders, and then they're able to go in and fish after that. And that's been very successful. There's been no Didymo found in quite popular rivers in Fiordland like the Worsley or the Clinton, which get relatively high use, especially compared to somewhere like the Large Burn over the western side, which is only accessible by helicopter and gets very little use as a consequence.
Given that it's been found, what are your concerns?
Well, the concern obviously is for the ecosystem, but also the fact that it may spread from there to other rivers. Although because it's a remote river, only accessible by helicopter, obviously it's quite a step to go from there to another river and requires another flight generally or a very long tramp, but that's unrealistic. So the concern is that it may be a source for further spread in Fiordland.
What kind of impact could it have on the ecosystem there?
Don't want to be too flippant about it really, but hopefully because they're very floodable, the Fiordland rivers on that western side in particular, that Didymo won't actually have a major effect on the ecosystem. Didymo flourishes in really stable environments, lake outlets for example, and that's when it forms those sort of characteristic large mats and really cloaking sort of growths that suppress insect populations and cause all the bad impacts. So hopefully because it's so floodable that won't actually occur over there, and it may be that it has a relatively minor impact on the ecosystem and it may not even be a detectable impact on the ecosystem. So fingers crossed really.
Will action be taken to try and eradicate it?
No, not at this stage. There's no evidence to suggest it could be eradicated. It's a little bit, I've used the analogy for people, it's a little bit like sort of spraying thistles in a paddock without using a selective spray. If you wipe the slate clean in a paddock and expect just the grass to regrow, that's not going to happen. So you may suppress it through chemicals, but you'll suppress everything else. You'll do a lot of damage to the ecosystem as a consequence, and it'll just regrow anyway, probably. So at this stage, it's not an option, a viable option for eradicating it.
How widespread is Didymo throughout Southland?
It's relatively widespread throughout Southland, indeed throughout the South Island, but not in Fiordland. Our efforts there have really worked. We're really quite pleased with that, obviously. But it's relatively widespread throughout Southland. It's not that noticeable in many of our rivers though, again because they're floodable and because also of the sort of relatively narrow band of environmental variables that Didymo flourishes in. It hasn't become prevalent or noticeable in the lower reaches of our main stem rivers because of sort of floodable nature and water chemistry requirements of the Didymo itself.
The Southern Institute of Technology saw a 72% course completion rate last year, a 2% increase on 2011, although still the lowest in a ranking of the country's 18 institutes of technologies and polytechnics. That's according to 2012 education performance indicators released by the Tertiary Education Commission. SIT also ranks 17th for the completion of qualifications at 64%, up from 55% in 2011. Also seeing an improvement on 2011, the Institute had a 59% student retention rate, a 21% increase, putting it at 16th, while SIT ranked 8th for the percentage of students progressing to higher level study at 40%, unchanged on 2011. Stay with us after the break. Wild weather strikes the Deep South. Welcome back. Wild weather struck the Deep South today with strong winds hitting the province. Met Service has issued a severe weather watch for Southland, with gale force winds expected around coastal parts of eastern Southland until early tomorrow morning. According to Met Service, Invercargill's strongest gusts earlier today was 75 kilometres an hour. Vovo Strait was gusting to 124 and Mid-Dome 126. The strongest winds were expected this morning and again during the evening. The Invercargill Fire Service said as at mid-afternoon they had not been called to any weather-related incidents. The Reserve Bank has left the official cash rate unchanged at its historic low of 2.5%. The Reserve Bank has indicated the OCR is likely to stay there until the end of the year, but says the removal of monetary stimulus will likely be needed in the future. Reserve Bank Governor Graham Wheeler says global outlook remains mixed, while growth in the New Zealand economy is picking up and, although uneven, is becoming more widespread. He says inflation is expected to trend upwards over the coming year, and the extent of the monetary policy response will depend largely on the housing market and construction sector. The seasonally adjusted value of exported goods fell for the 3 months to June 2013, down 4.7% to $11 billion, according to Statistics New Zealand. Dairy and meat exports led the fall, with values and quantities down for both. Milk powder, butter and cheese values fell 6.8%, with supply dropping by 18%. Meat values fell 9.2%, with quantities down 12%. For the year ended June 2013, goods exports fell $970 million to $45.7 billion, while imports fell $956 million to $46.5 billion, with a trade deficit of $777 million. Southland's regional pest management strategy is under review, and it's expected new pest management directions will be in place by the end of the year, including increased Crown responsibility to control 2,000 kilometres of land bordering farms. The Crown is currently exempt from the regional pest management strategy, leaving farmers bordering Crown land at risk of cross-boundary pests. But recent changes to the Biosecurity Act will require the Crown to meet good neighbour rules in regional pest management plans. Those rules manage a pest spread if that spread would cause costs to nearby land occupiers. The Ministry of Primary Industries says it and other Crown agencies are working with regional councils to determine good neighbour rules. Invercargill's playgrounds, sports fields and parks and reserves have a smoke-free policy in place, but with no formal evaluation, it's unclear how successful the policy's been or when smoke-free areas could be extended. As part of government's goal to be a smoke-free nation by 2025, Invercargill City Council designated smoke-free areas, and Parks Manager Robin Pagan says the level of voluntary compliance has increased with less adults smoking where children are involved. Expanding smoke-free areas to include museums, recreational centres, community facilities and transport areas is yet to be explored. Health promoter for the Southland Cancer Society, Sarah Chisnell, says it's about promoting positive smoke-free environments, particularly for our children to grow up in. Invercargill looks set to have a new festival in February next year. The Southern Wild Foods Festival, scheduled to coincide with the inaugural Auckland to Bluff yacht race, is being organised by the Rotary Club of Invercargill. Club President Mark Bain says potential sponsors have already shown interest and is hopeful the event could raise up to $45,000.
It was born from an idea, I suppose. We had a brainstorming session one night at my place, and one of our members had venison for tea that night, and we decided, right, that's a great idea. Let's start a wild food festival. So it grew from there.
So Hokitika have one on board already. You've been in touch with them, I understand.
Yes, 3 of our members jumped in a car and raced to Hokitika the week after we'd decided that we explore this concept. And they were very accommodating with providing us with a lot of information and really encouraged us to do it, on the back of their template, really. So that was great.
So they didn't feel that you potentially would steal their thunder?
No, not at all. And we're very conscious not to, in terms of the planning of the date of it, that it didn't clash with theirs. We didn't want to clash with the Bluff Oyster Festival here in Southland either. And they've also been very forthcoming and helping us with some of the planning as well. So we can learn, we just want to learn from their events. They're very successful events, and just want to make sure that we do it right.
So the Rape and Abuse Centre is the main benefactor from this initial festival that you're looking at?
Yes, they are, yeah.
But you're encouraging other stallholders to come on board and use it as a fundraiser for them too?
Yeah, we want to see it as a real community event and provide a platform for small organisations to have a stall at the event and raise funds for their own organisations as well, so yeah.
So are you suggesting that they come up with the food concepts, or...?
Yeah, we're going to put out I guess ask for expressions of interest from stallholders. We'll have some commercial stallholders, and we'll also have some not-for-profit ones as well. And so encourage some innovation, and we'll select the best of them, and so hopefully provide for a diverse event and offering.
So it's at the stadium. You've got quite a big space to fill. How many stallholders are you looking at?
We're looking at 28 at this stage. We've split them in half, probably with about 14 commercial stallholders and 14 non-profit stallholders.
And what sort of food concepts have come forward at this time?
It's a hunter-gatherer theme, and Southland's got some sort of pretty special food offerings down south, and keen interest in hunting, so we're thinking that will be some good offers and plenty to challenge people's comfort zones as well.
And that's it from news. Coming up in sport, the Herald's Gregor Paul and Wyn Gray discuss this weekend's clash between the Crusaders and the Chiefs. From the news team, good night.